Welcome to the Country Fried Outdoors Chasing Your Experience podcast. The podcast that will connect you to resources regionally and nationwide to engage them in open, honest discussions so that we can inspire the growth that you need to chase the experience you want. So strap yourself in because here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Chasing Your Experience podcast. I'm your host, Sean Smith, and I know I always say that we have a good one in store for you every episode, and it's almost like the boy that cries wolf, and I apologize for that, but I'm really excited for this episode because this is one of those innovations in the archery market that I think has been needed for a while now. We've always had 3D targets. We've always been able to go out and shoot 3D targets, but our focus was mostly on the rings when we go out and shoot these. And as a bow hunter, if you fully understand anatomy of an animal, then you know that at certain angles, and I hear people on the range too say that there are certain angles that these rings don't work for. And so then you're left by yourself trying to imagine where these vitals would be on your 3D target. And of course, we could get close so we could speculate and things. But I was always looking for the next thing to kind of take that to the next level. And yeah, there were some 3D targets that had the vitals kind of like built on the other side where if you shot through it, you could see where it was at. Okay, that's great, but it still doesn't really answer that full question, what's happening internally. And then, like magic, an app appears called QuivAR. And using modern technology of augmented reality, they can overlay the vitals in the 3D model on your 3D target. And I couldn't think of a better person to be online with us to explain that new technology and even the newest technologies just added to the app. And I'll leave it to him to explain it to you. But ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome one of the co-creators behind QuivAR app, Levi Perigo. Sir, how are you?
Thanks so much for having me on the show. That's a great intro. And to be honest, everything you said, Sean, is exactly why we created this technology, right? We started, so the co-founder, Matt Gross, and myself, we started by going to our local 3D range, right? Just the two of us going on a shoot. And what we have here in Boulder, Colorado, we have a great 3D range. You know, has really steep uphill, really steep downhill. And we would get there and we were competing against each other. And then obviously we would start arguing like, you know what, let's not aim for rings anymore. Let's go for the best hunter shots. And so we would eventually be arguing like, I think mine was a better kill shot or mine was a better kill shot. And so that's where we came up with the idea of QuivAR of, well, you know what, this arrow is sticking out of the target. It's stuck there in time and space. I think if we could scan that, we can place the digital anatomy inside of these targets and then see where that arrow intersects the anatomy. So then, just like you said, Sean, we don't have to rely on these rings, which the rings are great, right? They're good for scoring, but they're not good for a hunter score, right? Like you said, if I'm quartering away or quartering to or a steep uphill, if I'm aiming at those rings, I'm aiming at the wrong spot. And so that's where we kind of created this idea together. And from there, we just kind of said, hey, we both have tech backgrounds. What can we use modern technology to bring archery into kind of not even the future, just up to date?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things I've kicked around some ideas before, and coming from a law enforcement training background, we have a certain set of targets that are like cardboard based, and you blow up a balloon in them so that and then that balloon is tied to a string and it's kind of hung from a target stand or whatever, right? And then the idea is that, when you shoot it, the idea is that you're trying to hit a specific point, usually center mass on the target. And then if you hit that, the balloon will pop and the target would fall, right? And so one of the original ideas that I had is like, man, I wonder if I could develop an archery target to do the exact same thing, right? So that we'd have a focal point to aim at. I don't know how it'd work the cardboard or anything, or how it'd work a backing system or anything. the idea, I kind of play around with the idea for a little bit in my head, and then I'm like, you know what, this is way too much work. Plus, you don't get one shot at it, and then you have to go rehang it and stuff. It's like there's got to be a better way. And then that was about the time you guys started to come into the market. I'm like, this is fantastic, right? And I cannot praise the program enough, the app enough for what the potential that it has, and that it continues to build on for archers, not just your target archers, but I'm talking your hunters, to actually get a better understanding of shot angles and how to be more ethical and more efficient with their equipment. And I praise you guys for coming to market with that, because that's amazing. Um, I know there's probably been some challenges behind that, and we're going to dive into some of those probably today. But before we get too far along in, you said you had a tech background. Give me your elevator speech on you, like, your background, how you got into the outdoors, your passions, what drove you to those, and then ultimately, it sounds like we got an idea where QuivAR came from. But just give me that elevator speech real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So there has been obviously a lot of challenges when you're kind of starting your own company, and both Matt and I, we have full-time jobs, so we're doing QuivAR kind of, outside of our full-time day to day, and we both have a family. Matt has three small kids, all under like the age of 9. I got two daughters, and so we have, families and full-time jobs. Just quickly, so Matt, the co-founder, he has a background in aerospace and detectors, and that's where we started thinking of the LiDAR technology that we use in the app, and I'll talk more about that as we go. And then my background is my full-time job is I'm a professor at the University of Colorado. So I'm the director of the master's program in network engineering, which is in the Department of Computer Science. So we're both in the tech space, every day. And this is just one of those projects that QuivAR kind of came about of, you kind of take a little bit of your skill set and then bring your passion to your kind of hobbies. And that's where this is built. So it's just Matt and I. And so what is really important, I think, for people to know about the technology that we created is, listen, it's just Matt and I. This is a technology that we saw, like, this is something we want to use. We have kind of the skills and the background to use it. And so we built this for the archery community because we think it, like you said, it's going to help them. Number one, we think it's going to help with community. And we can get into that as far as what the app does is, I think archery was just really missing that. So, for example, every other industry has technology and statistics behind it, right? I mean, if I use Strava, every time I'm going for a trail run, every time I'm going out to ride my bike, I turn my GPS on. Like, if you don't record it, it didn't happen. Archery's never had this kind of technology statistics that we can see how we're doing and get better. And so what we want to do with QuivAR and what we have currently in the app is, I can track my arrows. I can see how I'm doing. I can see over time what my progression is going to be. I can see based on my hunter score at different distances, what's my ethical range, and all that's added in the app. And then going forward, we have a really, really high focus on community. And so right now we started with being able to do remote competitions. And so, Sean, you and I did a remote competition where you destroyed me, like everyone on this listeners would understand that. But that's just the first part, right? So right now we can start with 5 competitors. Either 2 or 3 of those can be in person and 2 or 3 of those can be remote. And we'll talk more about competitions as we go. But the idea of community is what we have coming up in a future release is this social aspect. So I can see your profile, you can see mine, I can see who's shooting. Right now we have leaderboards, right? So I can see everyone in the world, what their average hunter score is, how often they're shooting. But coming forward, we have the social platform, and that's going to kind of take everything to the next level where we can say, oh, let me see what Sean's doing today and how many shots did he shoot and what's his overall progression look like. And so we have a lot of things coming up that are really exciting, but kind of this original focus is the community aspect. And this is a very a long answer to my background. And so my background is in tech. The idea here is Matt and I are able to take what we do on our day to day into kind of our passion of archery. And that's kind of how we got to where we are.
Listen, when you're passionate about something, it is so hard to be really quick when you're explaining it because there's just so many minute details and things that you understand. And it's important for people to understand too. So I get it. When I'm teaching classes, when brick and mortar classes, that was one of my big downfalls. If it's something I'm really passionate about, I could talk for hours on it, and to the point where even I'm starting to get droopy eyed from being tired from just the amount of talking. So I get it.
And man,
So
what's so funny too is, I have a tech background and a lot of people in archery don't, right? So when I start diving into this super technical details, I'm like, wait a minute. This is the way more deep than what people are looking to do. So please stop me if I get too deep into technical stuff.
No, you're fine because most people they're like, "Hey, I turn my phone on, I scan the target, and then I go do what I need to do, and then after that,
Totally.
we that's all we know, right?" It was like, yeah, this just
Totally.
works. But I think also understanding how something works though also helps you understand some. I mean, I'm not saying there's big limitations to the QuivAR app. I'm not saying there's anything glaring that's a limitation, but I'm saying helps you understand what the limitations are and also helps you better understand and better appreciate what it's actually doing. So, feel free to dive into some of those topics and things. But so I guess let's start with getting the anatomy because you have quite a repertoire of animals that you guys have anatomy made for, right? So you've got turkeys, you got coyotes, you've got bears, you've got deer, and these are all available through. Are you what three manufacturers now are producing targets for you that we're aware of, right? That's Delta McKenzie, Big Shot Targets, and Dead Nuts, if I'm correct, right? They're all making
Yeah.
targets that are enabled. So let's go there. How did you guys? What was the challenges? What was the just the how did you get to making the anatomy for each of these animals?
Yeah, that's a that's a really deep question. We could spend an hour just on that.
Right.
But like you said, our partners right now for 3D targets are Delta McKenzie and Big Shot Targets, and then for 2D targets, it's Dead Nuts Outdoors. And um, what's really interesting about the 3D targets is, this is fantastic, right? We have kind of the top names in 3D targets. Delta McKenzie is the sponsor of the ASA Pro Tour. And then Big Shot Targets, if you've that's the one of the targets you have, right? That Real Wild Buck target looks fantastically realistic. The foam is outstanding. I can't say enough about those Big Shot targets. And then with Dead Nuts Outdoors, it's you get an actual realistic looking target. It's only 2D, but with the QuivAR app, we turn it into a 3D target, right? So we can see that anatomy from any angle. And what's cool about them is you can buy, a broadside elk, a quartering away elk, and a quartering two elk, three separate targets, all for a really good price point. And so we're really excited about all three of those partners. And then as you said, we have some kind of big news coming up soon about kind of our next ventures and where we're headed. But as far as the anatomy goes, that was extremely challenging. So you would think these anatomy models, you just, online and you get here's an anatomy for an elk. They don't exist, right? So if anyone's ever studied, right? So someone on the East Coast that's like, hey, I'm going to Colorado for an elk hunt. Let me start looking for elk anatomy. You search online and you're going to get 20 different answers, and they may only be broadside. And then, like, okay, what's that vital V look like? Well, in this person's picture, it looks like this. In this other picture, it's completely different, or the heart's here and the heart's there. So it was actually very, very difficult to get all these anatomy models, which every single one of these we built from scratch. And so the way we did that is, so I'm a professor at the University of Colorado. Colorado State is one of the premier veterinary schools in the country. And so I reached out and talked to the chair of the veterinary department, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for these these big game models. We're in Colorado. Surely you have some of these. And she was just like, no, not anything. We have horses and cows and pigs, but we don't have any big game anatomy. And she was like, if you guys develop them, we would love to use them. And so then we began kind of, starting from one place, and then we would get these opinions of wildlife biologists, game wardens, and as well as, kind of people that have been hunting for a long time. And Sean, it's it's almost comical how different these opinions are from these literal experts in the field. We would go to, the Colorado Game and Fish and then be like, "Hey, here's our elk anatomy." And they're like, "Oh, that looks good. I think the heart should be up a little bit." And then we would go to a wildlife biologist and they would tell us the opposite. Um, so the the I think your listeners will understand this. We got the most accurate input from the hunting community. So I'll give a shout out to some of the people that have helped. So, Remy Warren, Dan Staten from Elk Shape, Corey Jacobson from Elk 101. These people all gave us outstanding feedback. They're like, "Hey, I've harvested a lot of these animals. Here's a picture that I have," or kind of what you did in your kind of last shot angles kind of series that you did. One of those big ones is the frontal, right? How big is that? How big is that kind of frontal opening? And so Corey Jacobson actually, has some actual footage of, hey, here it is, here it is on an elk. This is how you can redo your model. And so all this to say, finding these different models was, a complete job in itself. And that was for elk, right? And you have to do that whole thing over for bear and then that whole thing over for turkeys. A fun story we like to tell on the turkeys are the turkey model was way harder than it should have been, right? I mean, we consume, millions of turkeys in the United States. How do we not have the anatomy for this? And so what we did is one of our friends has 100 turkey grand slams. So not 100 turkey kills, 100 grand slam turkey kills. And so we showed him the model and he's like, "Hey, actually I'm going out on a turkey hunt today." And so he literally, harvests this turkey and has a tape measure out there. And he's like, "All right, here's proportional for the cavity. Here's the heart. Here's how big the lungs are." And then we can kind of position all of that technically in the background. So yeah, getting these anatomy models is a lot harder than what people think. But with that said, going forward, we want to be the gold standard on any anatomy that you need. You can get into the QuivAR app, whether you have a QuivAR enabled target or not. You can get in there and kind of review the anatomy. One thing that you mentioned on the app is, so all these anatomies are in there for free. If you're a pro user, they're all unlocked. If you are the free user of the QuivAR app, the targets are locked. The only way to unlock them is just to scan a target. So you don't have to own the target. You can go into any pro shop and say, "Oh, you know what? Oh, there's an elk target in here. Let me scan it," and then it's unlocked. And the reason we do that is just because we want you to be able to experience that augmented reality on a target to kind of get the QuivAR experience. So it's all free, but it's just so much cooler to see it in person than just to scroll with it on your app. But yeah, whether you are using the app for, archery practice and statistics and competitions, just being able to see that anatomy, I think is something that's valuable to hunters.
Absolutely. And we've touched on that a lot. I mean, even the intro itself into the podcast and touched on the importance behind that, because it's easy for us to see the score ranks, but it's very hard for us to see where the actual anatomy is on an animal unless we've been in the business or we've been doing this for long enough. We have a general idea where it's at. And I wanted to take a minute for a special announcement. And I'm super excited for this one. But before I get too far along, just something doesn't feel right. Just hold on a minute. There we go. That's better. We had the owner of Sea Deer Camo on our podcast, Jason Kalman, several episodes ago. And from that, we started to build a great friendship and a partnership. Sea Deer Camo is a camo brand that is made by hunters for hunters. From base layers to outerwear, Sea Deer Camo has you covered from early season through late season. It is functional hunting apparel that won't break the bank. And we are so happy for this relationship with Sea Deer Camo that we have a code for you that you can use right now if you head over to huntseadeercamo.com, punch in the code countryfried10, and save yourself 10% on your order as you get ready for season to just hunt. And while you're there, don't forget to pick up one of my favorite articles, and that is the Mountain Ops Pants. And now, back to the pod. But imagine the learning curve that you've just decreased for all the new hunters coming into this space. in the archery realm to learn anatomy, off these models, because there's a lot out there. There's a few that are out there that are showing anatomies, and you see some models that the lungs are severely larger than what they actually are, and some, or they're too far back, or that there's this and there's that, and there's just, as you said, a general misconception, or just, how do I say this? Like, there's a varying opinions depending who you talk to on
Sure, sure.
where this anatomy lies, and actually putting it where it belongs is a major step towards more ethical harvests for hunters, and more success rates, in my opinion. Right? I mean, yeah, it takes you have to put work in. You have to get yourself in a position for that moment, and that's where most of the hard work comes. But don't spoil the moment by having a misunderstanding of where vitals are. And obviously, this is where the app really shines for this. So
And Sean, so not also for, new hunters, absolutely, but also, I mean, there's a lot of experienced hunters that, okay, well, I'm not exactly sure what a quartering away angle looks like, or if I'm shooting from a tree stand, as you've said many times on kind of your posts, is you're aiming for that exit. Well, if I'm just studying a piece of paper or, an image on my computer that's 2D in nature, it's hard for me to actually visualize, okay, well, if I'm in a tree stand and it's quartering away, what do those vitals actually look like? And we have a couple features coming out soon. I'm not going to drop them on here just yet, but you can visualize, your arrows through the target without actually shooting on the target. So not only can I look at the anatomy, but I could visualize placement and see what happens in the future. But the other thing too, not only is it for new hunters, but also super experienced hunters, but maybe I've only hunted whitetails on the East Coast. I have no idea what a black bear anatomy looks like. Right. So it goes between new hunters and experienced hunters.
yeah, and I'm sorry that I pigeonholed it, the new hunters. I really didn't mean to do that. It was one, but just getting that. I guess what I saw there was that just that learning curve. Even for experienced hunters, that learning curve now is starting to level out a little bit for everyone, as technology is catching up to our passions here. I guess the next thing I want to dive into here is, so how does it work? Like, if I've got this and we've got these amazing anatomy models now, how does it work to actually place them where they're supposed to be on the animal?
Okay, yeah, that's I'll give you kind of the technical answer, and please kind of steer me if it's too technical or not. So, actually, I have a chip here that I can show if the listeners or viewers can see that. So we have these NFC chips that we attach to every target, and we started with that when we started with our partners. We wanted a way to limit it specifically to our partners, and we do that with these NFC QuivAR chips. And those chips do multiple things. So first, they're NFC. So I'm going to tap it with my phone, just like I would any, Apple Pay, tap to pay kind of situation. And that does a couple things. That's going to, one, authenticate my phone and the target. So each of those chips is hard set with whatever target it is. So if that's a 3D elk or a 2D mule deer. So those chips are physically tied to that target. In addition to that, on the 3D targets, they have a little cutout on the actual phone where that NFC chip is. And so based on that, it's going to know where to place the anatomy. So the process is, first I use my phone, the NFC, to tap that chip. And then it's going to say, okay, yep, the QuivAR chip is enabled. This is a 3D elk. So now I know what target it is. I know what anatomy to pull from the library. And then the next thing you do is you use your camera to kind of show that chip. And what we're doing there is we're using we're using artificial intelligence to recognize the image on there, right? So this is the chip. We know this image. This is what's programmed into our AI backend. And it says, okay, I recognize that's the QuivAR chip. So therefore I know that marker in space. And therefore I know this is exactly placed on the rear quarter of this 3D elk. And therefore I'm going to place the anatomy here. So what we're doing is, we have this augmented reality model, and that's something that's kind of different. If you haven't experienced augmented reality before, it's kind of a different experience. a lot of people see it for the first time on one of our targets and they freeze. Like, I can't move my phone. It's no, you can walk all the way around the target. You can move up and down and see everything. And it's kind of a little bit of a trippy experience. Uh, so we encourage you to kind of move around, look at the target, see the anatomy from all the different angles. But yeah, the idea here is so that NFC chip, it authenticates the app with the target, lets it know what target it is, what anatomy to pull from the library, and then we use AI to say, okay, look at this image, and then based on where that is in space and your phone, place this augmented reality anatomy inside of this target. That way, it's the same every time. And then one other thing on how it's placed. The reason I got into this at the beginning of why we use these chips is when we originally developed the technology, we didn't have any NFC chips or anything. You just hold your phone up to the target, it uses the camera and it says, okay, this recognizes this is an elk, places the anatomy accordingly. But we wanted to lock it down to our specific partners. So if we don't use the NFC chip, you could show it any elk, could be a live elk, could be, a 3D target or 2D target, and it recognizes this as an elk and places it in there. But for these initial releases, we wanted to be able to control it in a much more safe environment, say only these targets work with it. Um, but yeah, in the future, we could just, use the artificial intelligence to pick out the animal, understand which species it is, place the anatomy, and go from there.
Now, does it scale it correctly then? So when I say that, like, so I not all targets are exactly the same size. Like, so different deer targets are going to have different dimensions, and that's where when you first said, well, recognize it as an elk target or deer target, well, then I would think, well, would you run into scaling issues then because okay, so this is a deer, we know it, but maybe it's the Delta McKenzie baby buck or whatever it is, the little I forget what they call them, like little daddy, baby daddy,
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like that's
yeah,
what they're
yeah.
called, right? That versus like the big daddy, so then you get this ginormous this ginormous overlay that covers up the entire target versus that. So I'm when you I'm assuming going with the NFC or some way of identifying that specific target made it easier to scale things so that it appeared correctly in relationship to that target. Am I
Yep,
tracking with that,
yep.
or is that?
You nailed it. Yeah, 100%. So even I think we have maybe, I don't know, 8 different versions of deer targets, and all of them are scaled exactly to the physical dimensions of that target. So, I think the one I think that you have and I've seen in your videos a lot is the big shot, real wild, big buck. That's one of the most kind of realistic, as outstanding foam, like we said before. And but also there's deer that are almost half that size. And so we're going to scale that appropriately as well. And one thing to think of while we're talking about this anatomy is, look at some of these 3D targets. Some of them don't really look that realistic. So the thing that is our anatomy is correct. It may look a little off in some of these targets because the targets themselves aren't very realistic. On the one that you have, the real wild buck, that is a outstanding model of what a deer looks like, and so our anatomy fits really well in there. But yeah, all these are scaled, to the exact target that they're in, and, that's one of the main reasons why we can't ship these chips out to people that have targets that are not built in specifically with the slot for the NFC chip, because they're all tailored exactly specific to each target.
Yeah. So, like you said, it recognizes where it's at in space and it can actually overlay that, overlay that image where it needs to be. And so that's a good point too, because you also make because a lot of the elk targets they're flat, like they're somewhat 3D, but they're flat, so they're not as wide as say like that big buck target is, so that you actually get a representation of like what a frontal shot looks like. It's close. Like I can't say it's like 100% accurate, but it's close. But when you get to some of these elk targets, I'm sure some of them might be a little better, but some of the bigger targets, like full size targets, they tend to be a little bit flatter to where you get a good representation of like quartering away, quartering to, or broadside. But if you look at it frontal wise, it's it's not very wide. So I can see the scaling issues there and dealing with that. Um, so I guess what were some of the challenges you guys came across? Because I know there was a new technology that you just released, and I know we have talked on Instagram a little bit that it was coming, and I was coming and it was coming. And I was like, I couldn't wait for this to get released to start playing around with it. And that's the vector. And, that I think, the app originally, like 1.0 was amazing, right? It was a step in the right direction for hunters, for archery enthusiasts. It was a step in the right direction. It still left a little bit of like subjectivity to it at that point where you had to kind of line it up, and you guys did a great job with videos showing on how to kind of accurately kind of depict what you interacted with by how you line your phone up with your arrow. But now with vector, there's no guessing, where it was. And I want to take a moment to talk about something that has transformed my approach to hunting. That's mock scrapes. I was introduced to the Scrape Doctor system 2 years ago in Columbus, Ohio, and let me tell you, it changed my game. If you're looking to dive into mock scrapes or just need a fresh perspective, I highly recommend checking out scrapedoctor.com. Their insights have been invaluable, and it's been great to see how my skills have developed since that first meeting. What's more, our relationship has blossomed into a fantastic friendship. And to celebrate that, I want to share an exclusive deal with you. Use code CountryFried15 at scrapedoctor.com to save 15% on your purchase. Trust me, you won't regret it. So I'm assuming that was a process that took a little bit of time to perfect. And I guess that's probably one of the challenges you had. So what were some of those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we first released, like you said, in the QuivAR 1.0 app, for people that aren't familiar, it was with our partners where all you could do is, you could scan this target and then the appropriate species anatomy would come in there, and that's it. I mean, I say that's it. That actually took an awful lot of work to come up with this, right? But all it would do is show the anatomy. And to be honest, like, we did not find that as exciting. It was kind of just a way to get us in the door with these partners for the 3D targets. And we had this part ready to go. And that actually took a lot of time, partnering with these manufacturers, getting our anatomy right. How are we going to place it? Which AI model are we going to develop? All of these different things took a lot of work to just get us to kind of the 1.0. And obviously, as soon as we do that, people are like, okay, yeah, I can see the anatomy. That's cool, but I want to see my arrows. And yeah, we're like, obviously, we're working on it. And so what happened in 1.0 is you could see the anatomy in there, but you shoot your target and then, this augmented reality would kind of show up over your arrows. And so we say, okay, we'll kind of line it up this way and you can see where your arrow path would be. But when we released the 2.0, maybe a little over a month ago now, that has our arrow scanning technology in there. And you're right, we call it vector because it's the vector of that arrow sticking in space. And so we can scan that with the camera on your phone. So right now we are just doing one arrow, and we can talk about that and why we do that and how that works. But the overview of the arrow scanning technology is that unlocks everything. So when I scan an arrow, now I can see that arrow's digital representation and where it intersects the digital anatomy from any angle, whether that's quartering from a tree stand, etc. And so when I start to scan arrows, well, now I can add a score to that. And now I can track that score and I can do trends over time and I can create a leaderboard and I can create competitions. But the background technology on the arrow scanning is we use AI again to detect these arrows in space. And everyone sees this and they're like, okay, yeah, I can scan this arrow in a couple seconds. That's cool. I want to scan multiple arrows. Yeah, obviously I get it. But let's take a minute and just say, hey, we can scan an arrow. This is the first time in human history that we can scan an arrow. Let's just pause for a minute and see where we are. And so our AI engine in the background is we built this to be able to scan this arrow. And we started with one just because that is kind of the hunting method, right? You get one shot in the field. And people have started to use it many different ways. So you can scan one arrow at a time. Um, if you have multiple QuivAR enabled targets, if I'm going to shoot 3 shots, at each distance, if you have 2 or 3 targets, to me, that's the most fun and the most focused training is, maybe I'm shooting at 50 yards. I shoot one at the 3D elk, one at the 2D elk, and one at the coyote. Then I go up and I scan all 3 of those. It just changes the way you do your archery training because you're much more intentional about each shot. And then you go in there, and when you're scanning it, you're not just pulling a group of arrows and then forgetting about it. Even if I scan one that doesn't score anything, and we can talk about the scoring procedures and how we did that in the back end in a little bit. But even if I shoot one that's a zero score, if I scan it, record it in the app, it knows, okay, that was at 70 yards. It was on this target. I can see how I'm trending and be like, okay, I'm getting better or I'm getting worse. So back to kind of the technology. So we used a AI engine to be able to scan these arrows. And to me, what's really exciting about that is the more people that use the app, the more people that scan arrows, the faster, more efficient it gets. And then we can begin to scan more arrows. So the way that the AI engine works is it needs a bunch of data and training data and real world field data. And so through the app, you can check and see if, do I want to allow this to add to the training model? All that's doing is it's saying every time a person scans it, it just feeds that into the background of like, okay, this person scanned it with, grass or on uneven terrain. And there are a bunch of sticks on the ground. How do I determine between an arrow and a stick? So we have to build all of that in there. And so another way that people do the vector scanning, if you have only one target, you can do this kind of hunter style, which is just, one shot, one kill type training. Or what a lot of people will do is they'll shoot 4 or 5 at the target and then pull out all but their what they think is their best arrow and then scan that one. So yeah, that's the overview of what vector is. We do have on the roadmap coming out, you'll be able to scan multiple arrows, but for now, we're just focusing on one to make sure that people understand the app, how to do it. That was another thing too. Is Sean, you mentioned it earlier. The archery community typically is not that tech savvy, and so we thought instead of kind of releasing everything at once, we've kind of found that it overwhelms a lot of archery users. Whereas if we can just say, all right, scan one arrow, you start on this side, you just kind of do a little half moon shape to the other side, get them learning and understanding how to scan one arrow before we release the multiple arrows in group shots.
Yeah. It comes in steps, and I think you're going about the right direction. I know when I first got the app and I I was doing a competition or I was doing something, and I shot a 3 arrow group, and I tried to scan. I'm like, it's only picking up one arrow. What's going on? And it took me a minute to like, oh, it only does one at a time. No big deal. And then you and I had a little, the discussion. And that's one of the suggestions. You said, yeah, you can shoot your group, but then pull all of them and leave your best one there and then scan that one. I said, okay, I can do that. But I'm getting to the point once the season starts getting, as we get closer to season, I stop worrying about group shooting and I worry more about that one shot, right?
Love it.
Because
Yeah, love it.
that's what you get, right? If you're lucky, you'll get an opportunity at a second shot, if need be, but don't count on that. So you get that one. So I'm really, as you said, intent and focused on making that one perfect shot. And so this is where that app shines for me because I just go up, shoot, walk up to it. And that's another thing that's kind of a motivator there is I don't have to walk so much if I do it right the first time. So just get it one and done and be done instead of trying to, do this multiple times. But at the same time, though, you just get that one representation of that one perfect arrow that you were trying to throw out there and get it. So getting to the perfect arrow, this is a good segue. Let's talk about the scoring model because I've noticed that there's this little white dot that sits on there, and I'm assuming that is like our, if correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that is kind of like what the perceived perfect impact is, or at least what the scoring like that's the epicenter that all the scores are based off of. Is that correct?
Maybe. So let's get into this kind of
Uh oh.
this. The hunter scoring system is it actually took us a long time to develop it. And the good thing is, the hunter community is fantastic. And so getting people's kind of opinions on how we do this and how we do that has been, really, really helpful and exciting for us. And so for the listeners who haven't seen the app, so we have this augmented reality, which places the anatomy inside the target. And then you can scan your arrow, and then the digital representation of that arrow shows on your phone, and then you can see where that intersects with the anatomy. And kind of think of it like if you're watching the football game, they superimpose the first down line, where the first down's going to be. We're kind of doing that with your arrow. We're superimposing a digital arrow on top of the arrow that you shot. But when we do that, we recognize that arrow and its vector in space. Then we can say where that intersects the anatomy. Well, when we do that, then we can give a score to that. So just like in an ASA competition, right? You have a 12 ring, a 14 ring, and a 10 ring, 8 ring, etc. But as we said at the beginning, depending on your angle, those aren't what you should be aiming for. With the hunter score, what we are basing that on is where your arrow intersects. Okay. And what is important here is we are assuming at this point in this release of QuivAR 2.0 that every arrow is a pass through. So when we scan that arrow, it's going to show its digital representation, and then we're going to assume that's a pass through. So therefore, if you hit it kind of broadside, you're going to hit both lungs. What we have in the future is if you hit the shoulder, we can say that arrow stops right there. If you hit a rib, it may not penetrate as far. We can determine all these things. If you've seen in the app, Sean, I'm sure you have. So it highlights what anatomy you've hit, and it'll say if you've hit the skeleton, right? Which means you've hit a rib, you've hit a scapula. Well, right now we haven't made it this complex. We wanted it again to be as easy for the user to understand as possible. But right now it just highlights the skeleton because you hit a rib on entry or exit. In the future, we can say, okay, you hit the scapula, that actually stops that arrow and you get no points for that. In the future, we can also say, again, we don't have this added yet. If you hit the guts and nothing else, that's actually a negative score. So what we did is we developed this scoring system, what we call Hunter, and we have AR at the end of everything. That's because we're using augmented reality and LiDAR and a lot of technologies in here, just kind of as part of the name. But with the Hunter scoring system, I'll get into that. And it was really, really fun to do. But also, I think in the current release, I think we have 10 variables that feed into the Hunter score. I think overall we have 20 variables that haven't been released yet. But so, for example, what we're doing is it isn't necessarily telling you what the perfect shot is, but we have to have some kind of scoring system, just like to know who's best. And so right now, what the perfect shot is on all of our different anatomy is dead center of the heart and both lungs. Whatever angle that is what the quote 100% score is. So if I just hit both lungs, that's going to be one score. If I hit a single lung, that's a different score. So all of these are going to be compounded. And all of these are factored in to what vital anatomy I hit. So that goes from both lungs, dead center of the heart. Let's make this up and say that's 100 points. But if I hit, an inch to the right of that heart, so not dead center, but still get both lungs, maybe that's a 90 points. Or if I just hit two lungs, okay, well, then that reduces the score even more, and et cetera. And so it also compounds with multiple organs. So let's say I'm doing a frontal shot. Well, if I hit both heart or both lungs and the heart and the diaphragm and the liver, that's going to compound to another score. And every score is different for every species. Okay, so a grizzly bear anatomy is going to be much bigger than a coyote. Okay, well, we need to reward that score because it's much easier to hit, double lung on a grizzly at 20 yards than it is on a coyote. So each score system is based on species, and which is essentially based on the size of the vital zone. In addition to that, it is distance, and distance is not linear because, let's say 20 yards on a deer is going to be, max score of 100 points if I get dead center in the heart, both lungs. 20 yards on a coyote is going to be a little higher than that because the anatomy is, half the size. Okay, but what I mean by distance is not linear. If I'm shooting a deer broadside at 20 yards, if I go to 60 yards, okay, that 40-yard difference is not the same from 20 to 60 as it is from 60 to 100. And so it's actually a power curve linear. So it's not, the same point value from 20 to 60 is not 40 points higher. from 60 to 100 is not just 40 points higher. So we have this power curve that kind of goes, like a hockey stick for distance. And that is not at all to encourage, trick shots or people shooting at, 120 yards. I think you agree with this, Sean. I highly value shooting at distance. If I'm shooting at 100 yards, 40 yards seems a lot easier. And so we rewarded this in the hunter scoring system, not to encourage people to get, more points by shooting really far distances, but to reward precision and accuracy, right? So if I'm shooting, and I get a score at a deer at 20 yards, well, if I can hit the lungs or the heart at, 100 yards, I should be rewarded for that score. So the main thing there is not to encourage these kind of trick shots, but just to reward kind of precision and accuracy. So that's a really, really high overview of the hunter scoring system. I'll be happy to dive into any of these kind of specifics further. But does that kind of answer what you're looking for?
Yes, no, that makes sense. And so with my instructor background, we need to find a way to push people outside their comfort zone, because it's easy for me to sit in front of the target and shoot 20 yards all the time. This is my comfort zone. This is what I want to do, right? But then, as you said, if we reward more challenging shots, we reward more challenge. If we challenge ourselves and we get a reward for that, then you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone and you're actually growing and you're becoming better, right? It's not saying that I'm training myself to shoot a deer 120 yards in real life, right? That's not what this is. That's not what I mean by any of this. What this is it's actually teaching you to be a better archer, because the further in, I'll focus on distance just for a minute, right? The further you are from a target, the more your imperfections are magnified at the end, right?
100%.
Because we're all talking about angles, a minute of angle, MOA, things like this. And of course, that's more rifle speak than it is archery speak. But if you understand how this works, so an MOA at 100 yards is close to 1 inch, right? If you go to 200 yards, it's 2 inches. So what that means is that the further out you go, it's an angle that's ever expanding, and the further out you go. So what that means is that if let's say you make like a half MOA mistake on your shot at 20 yards,
Mm-hmm.
that's not that bad. You do the same thing at 100 yards, now it's a half inch. Like, I understand that
Yep.
that's not terrible, but you see, as we push things out, the more it gets magnified for you. And I just finished recording an episode with Brent from A3 Archery Custom Bowstrings. And let me tell you, I'm impressed. Brent has over 30 years of experience building custom bowstrings, and it all started from his own personal need as a professional indoor archer, needing a set of strings and cables that he could rely on for precision and consistency, and not constantly dealing with peep twist or bows coming out of time. Brent offers both platinum and premium sets of strings. Platinum strings are made from the new B99 Bloodline fiber. You're not going to find a better fiber out there. And the premium strings is from the old and true BCY 452X. So if you're in the market for a set of strings and precision and consistency is at the top of your list, check out a3archery.com and order your set today. And as a special treat, use the code COUNTRYFRIED. It'll save you 15% on your next set. And that's why I shoot distance so much is it's fun. I like doing it, but also it makes, as you said, that 20, 30, 40-yard shot almost impossible to miss, because now it's this big thing that's taking up my entire view, and you just can't miss at that point, if you become proficient at those distance targets. And I appreciate that explanation of how the scoring works, and I also appreciate that power curve you gave to it, and also how it expounds on not only just distance but also just the challenge, and also accuracy and precision, because that's what this is about, right? This is about precision, it's about accuracy, it's about becoming better. So I appreciate that, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. It was actually, really kind of a lot of brainstorming sessions and a lot of feedback on how we do this and what makes the most sense. And, like I said, it's not to encourage trick shots, but something that is also fun is you can compete with your friends and say, hey, we're only going for heart shots. Because I don't know about you. I know a lot of people, I don't aim for a heart shot on a deer, right? I'm going for, a double lung, best shot I can do. Um, but in this, for the score, we have to have something as the perfect score to base everything on. And so, we have that as dead center of the heart. we're not saying that's the best place to aim when you're in the hunting scenario. We just have to have something as, okay, this is the top score. And so right now that's dead center of the heart and both lungs. But like when you're doing competitions, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is the best hunting scenario, but it is kind of fun now to be like, okay, I know where the heart is hiding inside of this just deer anatomy target. There's no rings, there's no dots that you're aiming at, and it really changes your perspective on I have to know this anatomy because now I know for this competition, I'm aiming for the heart. Whether that's a quartering away shot, out of a tree stand shot, I have to know where that is. Now, am I going to aim for the heart in the field? I personally am not, but just knowing where that is and being able to kind of practice aiming for that is going to make us better archers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you mentioned the competition or the competition aspect of the app. So let's start talking about these new features that you have built in where that social networking building. And I know you said you have a social part coming out soon, but what you have now, let's talk about that community building uh pieces that's in the app now. Like the competitions, the recording the shots, all these things.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we have so far in the QuivAR.0 release is there's the free version, which is always free. Everything's available. It's really almost exactly like the paid version. The only difference is you can only scan 3 arrows a day, and for a lot of people, that's fine. That's plenty. Um, so the only difference between the pro and the free version is with the pro version, you can scan unlimited arrows. You get complete filtering of the leaderboards and it unlocks all of the anatomy models. So on the free version, all those things are there. You can only just scan 3 arrows a day. But you can still compete against your friends. You can still have competitions. On the free version, you just can't create a competition. You can join a competition, you just can't create it and share it with your friends. So what the competitions are is I know a lot of my friends do not live in the same city as me, and I would love to be able to shoot with them and compete with them. So in the new QuivAR app, that is all available. It's all for free. You can compete with your friends. Any competition is up to 5 people at a time. And so what that means is, I can invite 5 of my friends that have the QuivAR app. The only kind of restrictions are you have to be shooting the same target, right? So when you and I competed, we both have the big shot, real wild buck. And so you and I can compete remotely, all the way across the country. And, you know, all of us have different schedules. We may have family, we work different times. And so what's cool about these competitions are I can start this competition and there's no time limit, right? So you and I can say, let's complete this by a week or let's complete this weekend or over a month, right? So it doesn't matter. Everyone's schedules are different. But some of the things that are, I think, really exciting about the competitions are one, you can either do them in person, right? So if you've created a competition, a little QR code will pop up and you can just share that with the person right beside you. And now you're both joined immediately into this competition. But what the competitions are is you get to choose what target you're shooting, what distance, how many arrows you want to do. And then based on that, the app's going to do everything for you in the background. So every time you scan an arrow, you're going to get your hunter score, and that's going to be based on what vital anatomy you hit and your distance. And then it's going to automatically add your score. And then each time you shoot another arrow, another arrow, another arrow, all those are going to be compounded and your scores added up for you. And it's going to choose, based on that, who the winners are. Excuse me. In addition to that, um, the competitions are all going to be scored again based on the anatomy of that species and the distance. Another feature that we really like and we think is fun is let's say I have 5 of my friends shooting. If I'm the last one to shoot, let's say there's 3 shots that we're shooting at 50 yards. Whenever I go in to shoot, everyone else who's already shot that, their arrow shows up on my target. So let's say, 4 people have shot and I'm the last one to shoot my arrow. So when I go in, I shoot my first arrow, I scan it. When I'm looking at the live target, everyone else who's already shot that shot, their arrow shows up on my target. So I know, okay, this person missed the heart. This person only got one of the lungs. And I see all of their scores on my physical target in real time. So it's really exciting to be able to see, oh man, and in our example, Sean, every one of them was double lung in the heart. Right. So I could see where his shots were on my target. And then after that, there's a real kind of aftershot report. I can click on that, look at it on my phone, move it around in 3D space, and I can see everyone else's arrows on my kind of digital target. So it gives you this kind of sense of, man, I actually am kind of shooting and competing against my friends here because their arrow shows up on your actual live target. And when I'm back home inside, I can go back and review every single shot and I can see where everyone else's arrows intersected their target, what their score was. It's just a really fun way to interact with your friends who you don't necessarily get to shoot with in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna a disclaimer here. I think you let me win. I'm just gonna say it right now. I think you
Not a chance. Not a
I
chance.
think you let me win. But here's so one of the features I didn't know was there was that after action report. That is, I love that. Like I didn't know that was there, and I was watching one of your shorts, or actually it was the short of our competition where you went in and showed the after action. I'm like, that's neat. And it's not just in the competitions too, it's actually in like any of your recorded shots. You can go back and look through and see those where your arrow interacted on that target through the anatomy, and you can pull away the skeleton, you can pull away the liver, you can pull away what in the app is called others, but what that is like the guts, the stomach, and also the diaphragm gets pulled away, and then you can pull away the heart, the humerus, like you can pull this stuff away and really dial in and kind of build that model back up to see where all you interacted with. And it's there, it's logged there for you to go back and look at whenever. And that's, I love that feature. Like it's one of those things where like, yeah, it's good. I can go in here, I can scan a target, I can see where it's at, I can see where my arrow interacted with, and like that's great. But now all of a sudden, now it's logged for me to go back and review these in time. Like maybe it's a month later, it's there. I can go back. Oh yeah, look here, I remember this. So
Yeah,
that I love that feature.
it's that. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Some of these things is hard for the user experience because there's a lot of features in there that aren't exactly obvious to everyone. But it's definitely changing the way I interact with my archery. Is I may go out there and let's say I'm shooting 12 or 15 arrows. I've scanned all of them. What I want to do as soon as I go back in my house is go review all these. I can go back and I can scan through and I'd be like, oh, look, I shot, 6 shots at 70 yards. I shot 4 at 40. And let me look at each of these shots. Oh, this was on the elk. Let me spin it around. Let me look at what my score was. It just gives you this whole other interaction level of kind of reinforcing your training. And and it just takes it to the next level when it's a competition because you can go in there, you have to really focus on what you're doing, and then you can go in and review your shots afterwards and be like, "Man, I'm doing the same thing over and over." But it just gives you that kind of whole nother interaction of us as archers. We haven't had this statistics to review to there's nothing that shows, am I getting better? What's happening? Because currently, you can go to your pro shop and do a 3D shoot, but then you're recording everything on paper. Like, do you go back and know what it actually looks like? No, you see, I got a 10 on this shot. But now that stuff's saved in your app forever, right? I can always go back and look at my history and see how I'm doing. And it just starts to change how you do your archery and the statistics and hopefully makes us better archers.
Absolutely. Here's something I just thought of, and especially when you're looking at long term, going back, look back. I wonder if there's a way that you could pull from like a weather service, like whatever one, so it can give you what the conditions of that day was and can record that with those shots so that you can see if there was like a wind. Like, so say like that day was like a 5 to 10 mile per hour wind, and then you start to see what your shift was for that day. Like you can go back and see, oh, if it's windy like this, I noticed that I've got like how much that shift was when you go back and look through all those shots. Just spitballing. And we would like to thank you for your support of the Chasing Your Experience podcast. If you'd like to continue to support the podcast, then please check out our online store at bonfire.com. There, you can purchase exclusive Chasing Your Experience podcast t-shirts and hoodies for all members of your family. Check out the link down in the description to find the store. And now, back to the pod.
Yeah, yeah. No, we are 100% on board. So in the future coming up when we do advanced profiles and statistics, so we think community is number one, right? We want to build an archery community where people can compete against each other, have fun, and we think that is what the next generation, or hopefully our generation of archers, is looking for. And then I think the next thing is statistics. So we are deep into statistics and what we have recording. And when we unlock kind of the next version of your profile, all of these statistics are going to be in there. So we want to be able to know what the temperature was, what release you were using, what arrows you're using, all of this stuff. So I know that, okay, if I change my release, my group sizes are getting bigger. Or if I lifted shoulders the morning before this shot, how does that affect my group size? And all of this stuff we have coming in the future. The good thing is it's only tech, right? We don't, all these QuivAR enabled targets that you have, they're going to be the same. They're always going to work. Whenever we want to do a new feature, it's just an update to the app, right? Nothing you need to change on your side. But we definitely have a lot of advanced statistics coming in the future that is really important to us, because if you can't measure what you're doing, how are you going to improve it? And so we have a high focus on data analytics and statistics in the upcoming releases in the future. And so the other good thing about that is I think we all kind of understand this with the QuivAR app. But one thing when we designed it at the beginning is we want to make sure this is your own bow, your own arrows. You don't have to change anything in your setup, right? Because there's some other things in there where maybe you add something to your riser that, checks how steady your bow hand is. Or, it's a kind of just a game that you play. We wanted to make sure that you don't have to change anything about your setup, how you shoot. This is just another way to interact with your targets, gain more statistics, and have fun with archery. So it's your own bow, your own arrows, and, you know, it's just the phone in your pocket, right? We could have done this much better and much easier and much faster if you had an external device doing all this, but we just wanted that ease and convenience of I'm just using the phone in my pocket. Everything else is just technology.
Yes. Well, I think you're going the right direction because everyone has a phone, right? Some of us are a little bit slower to get into the smartphones than others. I still know some people that have the old analog phones, as we call the dumb phones. But still, the idea though is that it's something you have with you all the time. You've leveraged it now to improve the archery experience for a hunter, right? Shooting paper is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to discount shooting dots and things for people because that's a whole nother level of consistency there. And I understand that. But you've taken that now and made it more of a hunter specific, where not only am I improving my consistency, but I'm also improving my hunter efficiency by actually aiming where I should be aiming at on a live animal versus whatever the score rings are or whatever that dot is, right? So you're kind of building in that. I don't like the term muscle memory, but you're building in that automation that people tend to get into once stress levels start to rise. So I love what you've done on a training perspective, that it goes more than just understanding anatomy. It's now building consistency where I can score what I'm doing, right? Compete with others. I have a scoring way to actually score and be um actually relative to a hunting scenario. I love what you guys have done here. It's and I know I've said that I'm not trying to blow your head up any or anything, but I truly feel that what you guys have done is probably one of the best innovative training tools for an archery hunter that has hit the market in a while, that is available because we can practice shooting dots to build consistency. That's great. But how do you actually practice hunting scenarios other than realizing where anatomy is and then forcing yourself not only to compete with your friends or just compete with a random stranger?
Hmm.
That adds a new
Hmm.
level of stress that you will never get just shooting targets by yourself. So all you've done is everything you've done, every envision, even though it's community building, every vision you've had is actually building that archer to be better. And I applaud you for that. That's amazing. So thank you for what you guys have done. It's everything that, and I really look forward to the future iterations. I really do. Like I can't wait to see what the next tech stuff is going to be that comes out with the app. So because you guys have come so far in just a short period, you guys have been out, and the vector, the arrow scanning, that just took it to a whole new level. And I'm looking forward to the new iterations. Um, Levi, is there anything that you would like to discuss that we've not talked about yet?
Yeah, like another 2 hours worth for sure. We're just touching the surface here. We're just getting started. I think one thing I want to mention is, first of all, thank you for the compliment. Obviously, this has been a lot of work, but it's a kind of definitely a passion of ours just to make the archery community better. And feel free, anyone can always reach out to me. Instagram is usually the easiest. I think it's at quiver.app. And I think we can maybe put that in the show notes or anything that people can reach out to me there. Um, a few things to know is, obviously we're always trying to improve it. Any feedback that you have. Currently, the app is available for free on Apple and Android. Um, Android has been extremely difficult, and just because the technology does not work in a lot of the phones, just the phones aren't capable. And unlike iOS for Apple, Android has, 300 models of phones. And it's hard to make this kind of cutting edge technology work in all of those phones. And so currently it's kind of working in what we consider the top tier Android phones, which is mostly what people have anyway. Um, but it's just really, really surprising that, Android is an extremely popular operating system. They don't support a lot of this technology. So right now, currently only the top Android models support it. Obviously all the iPhones are going to support it, but it is available on Android and iOS. But the cool thing with this technology is, think of where we are right now with QuivAR. This is the worst it's going to be. Our technology is always going to get better. The phones are going to get faster. We're going to be able to improve and go from here. So what we see right now is just the starting point. We're only going to get better and faster and more accurate on everything that we do going forward.
Well, like I said, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see what the next iteration is going to look like with the QuivAR app. And as you guys build and improve, and I'm really interested to see what that social, like the social outlook is going to look like. That community you build with that once that gets going and rolling. So, uh, Levi, I can't express enough how humbled I am that you were here and that you spent the last hour to talk with us. And I appreciate you taking the time to, number one, you and Matt both, to develop this this passion, this idea. It took it from idea to actual reality. And like I said before, and I'm gonna say it again, like there are very few things, technology wise, that actually makes archery better, right? This is one of those things. Like we as hunters, we can always say that technology in a sense is making, and I'm not saying I'm on this perspective, but there's a big push that technology in hunting is starting to, I don't know, maybe lessen the thrill of it, right? Something rare. This is one of those things, though, technologically wise, is actually increasing the thrill of it, because now you have a realistic way of training for your hunts or training for those encounters, and you work so hard to get to that encounter, to get that one moment, right? Some people spend
Mhm.
years for that one moment. And as like I think it was a speech by Roosevelt, like, how how disheartening would it be that a man finally gets the opportunity that he's going to be tapped on the shoulder, that he's not prepared for that moment. Like how
Mhm.
disheartening,
Mhm.
how bad is of a moment would that be? So now we have a way to be prepared to the best of our abilities using technology that's in hand, that doesn't cheapen the sport, but enhances it. And I once again, I applaud you guys for that. So,
Man, that we really, really appreciate that because that is something that has been a struggle and that we've really been passionate about is, how much technology is too much technology. And we're trying to find that. I mean, this has been around forever, right? I mean, when we went from a longbow to a recurve bow, from a recurve bow to a compound bow, people are like, oh, that's cheating. What is kind of the best use of technology? And we're trying to kind of thread that needle of this is useful technology that's going to make you better as an archer, but not reduce your experience. And so thank you for understanding that that struggle is real. And, hopefully we're kind of right in that sweet spot of this is just going to make a better archery community, more archers, and give them just a new, fun, interactive way to kind of participate in archery.
Well, Levi, I don't think I could said it better myself. Is there any final parting words you have for the listeners before we close this thing out?
No, it's just been a real pleasure to be on here. And I think, we may have to label this podcast as just part 1, right? Because we got so much more still to talk about. And I'm looking forward to it. And thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, I'm always down for a series with someone, especially with something that is so innovative as this. And Levi, I appreciate you jumping on here. Hopefully, in future episodes, when we get you guys back, maybe we can get both of you on, or just you. It doesn't matter. Like, this is a great episode. I've had fun. Hopefully, you can get your partner on here with us. But, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate that you took the last hour to sit and listen to Levi talk about the innovation of the QuivAR app. I cannot endorse this enough. And I say endorse, like, obviously I'm not paid by anybody, but I cannot recommend a better tool for an archery hunter than it is the QuivAR app. It's available now finally on the Android. It was just iOS there for a while. It was available for. Now it's on the Android. Get the app, get yourself one of those targets that's enabled for it, and get out there and stop guessing and start knowing where your shots are impacting at. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate that you took that time to sit and listen to us. If you would take just one more moment and just leave us a review, give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, whatever it is you want to do, and then share us with your friends. We would appreciate that. That helps the show more than you can think. And I cannot say enough. Go check out QuivAR app on Instagram. Go follow Levi and Matt on there and see where they're going. You'll know exactly where the app's at, where it's going. They do a great job of updating people with that, and they are very responsive. Like, I cannot say enough. If I've had an issue, I got on Instagram, sent a message. I did less than 24 hours later, I've got a response, and we worked through and got some things squared away, or we've talked over some things. So you guys are very responsive, and I can vouch for that. But with that being said, folks, until our experiences cross paths again, may y'all have the courage to fail, but the humility to learn. And as always, we hope you stay safe out there, and God bless you. Thank you for listening to the Country Fried Outdoors Chasing Your Experience podcast. Before you go, don't forget to leave us a review and follow the show on the podcast platform of your choice. Are you hungry for more Country Fried Outdoors? Then follow us on Instagram at Country Fried Outdoors, or subscribe to our YouTube channel at Country Fried Outdoor Productions.